Welcome back to Dark Side of the Ring Unheard, the podcast from the hit Vice TV series Dark Side of the Ring, where we plumb the depths of the Dark Side archives, just hundreds of hours, I don't know, dozens, many hours.
Probably 500.
Wow, 500 hours worth of interviews done with wrestling's giants, wrestling's less heralded, wrestling celebrated, good guys, bad guys, everything
Wrestling's
in between.
unknown.
Wrestling's unknown.
There you go.
Coming up soon as well. And so, of course, Dark Side of the Ring, Season 6 resumes Tuesday night, 10 p.m. Eastern Time on Vice TV with a look at a one-of-a-kind figure in the business. He had a fleeting run in WWF in 93 and 94. Ludwig Borga, we have here. Tell us about the Hasbro principle.
Yeah, he also had one figure. Ludwig Borga is next week. Wow. This episode is one that fans have wanted to see for so long. And we finally did it. And oh my God, I can't believe it took us this long to do this story. It's an insane story. But the Hasbro principle, as you asked, is kind of the metric we're using now for Dark Side. Like, if they had a Hasbro figure, like this was from the early 90s, early to mid 90s.
Mid-90s, early 94, this figure came out.
94. Then they're game for an episode.
Totally.
Yeah.
Like if they got a figure, let's go.
Yeah.
And this, I think, is the most valuable.
It's one of them. It's one of the on the green card Hasbro's. It's one of the most valuable.
Let me take a look here.
Hashtag, shout out rather to Mabel Toys for this one.
Oh
I
yeah.
was just looking for any concerning tattoos. But
Oh yeah, not yet.
Yeah. So next week's episode, Tuesday at 10 on Vice, is this Ludwig Borga story. Now, I have to admit that I didn't know much about his wrestling career or his post wrestling career, but this is quite the story. It is, he basically came in for about a year, I think, right, in the WWF, and he was a heel from Finland. They could make a heel out of anybody from a foreign country.
That sworn enemy of the United States.
Yeah, exactly. So he is the Hellraiser from Helsinki, is what they called him.
Yes.
And but he had a very interesting post wrestling career. During his time in the WWF, they found that he had SS tattoos on his calf, which was very disturbing.
Not there either.
Not on the figure, thankfully. But they disposed of him, and they didn't bring him back. He got injured, and I think it was just any excuse to get rid of him.
Well, it was weird. He was advertised for a number of shows and never
showed up.
All this, like at Rumble '94, he was supposed to face Tatanka, didn't show up.
Yeah.
And then I think even WrestleMania 9 he was supposed to be in, but he never showed up.
There you go.
It was weird.
And so then when he returned to Helsinki, he got into the world of politics and became sort of this white nationalist, neo-Nazi politician. Jesus. And, I won't spoil it, but he fell into a dark demise himself. And so the episode is not as much about his wrestling career. It's obviously covered, but everything after is just like fascinating and insane and alarming and concerning all at the same time.
Yeah, it's a tale about as lurid as you're going to hear on Dark Side of the Ring. This guy just disappeared from wrestling fans' consciousness in the United States, and the next thing you heard about this guy, he's just this firebrand, far-right politician in Finland. It's
divisive,
amazing.
Controversial,
Like
always in the headlines.
Looks like the first coming of Brock Lesnar.
Oh my God!
Well, he definitely had a bit of the haircut going. So, of course, Jack Encarnacio, JP Sorrow from the Lapsed Fan Wrestling Podcast. This, of course, Evan Husney, co-creator and executive producer of Dark Side of the Ring. So thrilled to get into some of this stuff. And our subject needs no introduction. It's Bret the Hitman Hart. And for a period of time when Ludwig was in the WWF, Bret Hart was, pretty much the top dog in the organization. Yeah. Interestingly, he was supposed to feud with Lex Luger, and we know that Lex versus Bret was a huge thing leading into '94. Who was the WWF going to go with as their top guy? And it became Bret, who we also have here represented in action figure form from JP's collection.
Well, they never wrestled, but I figured here we could just.
Oh God, he's never going to live this one down.
Oh, let's see.
It's got a collar and elbow.
An arm
Is that an arm drag? Yeah. First arm drag Ludwig ever took. Let me tell you that. Definitely not his forte.
We'll do it right. We'll put him in the sharp.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Perfect.
Yeah, so he'll suffer for the rest of the episode as if he didn't.
Cause
and I'll suffer for the rest of my life for doing that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, right.
But Bret the Hitman Hart, of course, sat for you guys for your very first season 1 episode of.
That's right.
Of the Montreal Screwjob.
Yep.
This has been dramatized 100 times over. It's one of the most remarkable stories ever in wrestling, and he's a guy who, engendered so much loyalty from the companies he worked for growing up, working for his father as well in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, who owned a wrestling territory there, Stu Hart, and then becoming a huge superstar with WWF as they took off in the mid-'80s. And we're going to start this episode of Unheard right in the middle of things, in media res, as they say, okay? So Bret Hart is broken in. He's in the WWF. It's 1985 or 86. They're riding high. Everyone's got merchandise out the wazoo. People are making way more money than he ever expected he would have made coming up in the business and learning his craft. He comes in the WWF in 84. At the same time, WWF takes off in 84, 86. There's the rock and wrestling connection, right? Okay, so rock and roll music through MTV form kind of a partnership with WWF. And these wrestlers are in music videos, and Cyndi Lauper's involved, and Mr. T, who's...
They're intermingling with rock stars now more so than ever.
Right, and pop culture sensations, and they're becoming kind of rock stars in their own regard.
Right.
So Bret's on a flight. This is a famous story in that the clip surfaced on YouTube, okay, of a guy who appears to be Sammy Hagar from Van Halen, being introduced to the crowd at Madison Square Garden in New York City in the middle of a WWF show. This guy's in the ring.
Yeah,
hey,
like, Sammy Hagar's here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wait, you got it in the.
He was introduced by the ring announcer to the people as a special guest in attendance. And people see this clip. It couldn't be less Sammy Hagar. I mean, when you hear the guy's voice, he clearly manipulated his way into the ring and fooled everyone backstage in a business that tells themselves they can't be fooled, right? That they're the foolers.
Right.
Which will be a big theme on Unheard as the season unfolds. Is the easiest guys to fool are the bullshitters. So here's the story, because as you guys were able to discover, you sat with Bret for the episode you did on Adrian Adonis.
That's right, season 4, yeah. And this is just part of the fun of doing, what we're able to do, and so grateful that we're able to do, is to sit, with these legends like Bret and get these types of stories. And, we didn't go in prepared for the Sammy Hagar story, but these are just the fun little things that you get, little side dishes you get to the main interview. And but they also can be frustrating because there's no place for them in the episode.
Not here.
But they're not here. It's too long of a side quest, but it's so... This is a great clip, and it's like, damn, I wish we could have found a way at least to do the reenactments of this story. So use your imagination in terms of trying to picture this story unfolding. And this is in 2 parts, right?
It is in 2 parts. So we're going to start with him reflecting on being on a plane. We're looking here at clip 4.
Okay.
And he's on a plane, and this guy who introduces himself as Sammy Hagar to Bret on the flight, because this guy knows they're wrestlers. He's like, you guys are wrestlers, right? It's him, Bret Hart. It's his brother-in-law, Jim, the Anvil Neidhart, who longtime fans will remember.
Who does that? Who says...
They strike up conversations.
Who says, like, oh, I'm Sammy Hagar?
Okay, well, we should...
All right.
Just because it's so good.
It's all there.
Okay, it's all there. So here we go. Here's part 1. Here we go. All right, Bret, take it away.
I remember Adrian was in front of me, right in front of my seat, and I was talking...
Adrian Adonis, who is the subject of the season 4 episode.
Yeah.
Some guy, and he was sitting right beside me, and had kind of like a rock and roll type of jacket on, like almost something that Jimmy Hart would have worn or something like that.
So keyboard?
I remember I started talking to him, and he goes, he's all excited. He goes, "You guys are wrestlers, aren't you? WWE wrestlers?" And I'm like, "Yeah, we're wrestlers." And I started talking about wrestling, and I said, "So what's your deal?" He goes, "I'm a rock and roll singer." And I said, so who are you? And he goes, "I'm Sammy Hagar."
I love... Hold on.
His face.
When you have to look
His
left
face.
to right before...
Right.
Yeah, wait, we got to...
"So who are you?" And he goes, "I'm Sammy Hagar." I'd never seen Sammy Hagar. I've heard the song, "Can't Drive 55" or whatever it was. But he had just, to give you an idea, this time period, he had just joined Van Halen. Literally like a week or 2 before the big announcement came out that Sammy Hagar was going to be the new lead singer for Van Halen.
Okay, so that's the setup, right?
I also like that he calls the company WWE. He says that like he...
Yeah, like they were WWE back then, exactly.
Well, I mean, they're trained to do that.
You could tell. So there it is. That's how... Those are the answers to your questions, how they get the conversation struck up. And at the time, it means something that you guys are wrestlers, because they're now national television stars to a degree they really hadn't been before because of this WWF expansion. And so here is how we go from that interaction on the plane, and he ends up, when they land, they get to talking about, well, we'll go to a match at the Garden, and they end up hitching a ride in the same limo. This fake Sammy Hagar, who they don't know is fake yet, with Adrian Adonis, Jim Neidhart, and Bret Hart, and they get to the Garden, and they get there, and they're backstage, and they're glad handing and things like that. And there are other celebrities in attendance, including a member of the New York Yankees.
That's right.
At the show.
That's
and they
right.
would bring celebrities out of the ring and say, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our special guest. One of them was Sammy Hagar. Another one was a Yankees player. That's important to know going into this clip.
Okay.
So here is how we get from that plane ride into Madison Square Garden.
I'm sitting beside Jim. Jim kept going, that's not Sammy Hagar.
Oh my God.
That's the best.
And I'm going, what do you mean it's not Sammy Hagar? I guess looks like it could be Sammy Hagar. Why wouldn't it be Sammy Hagar? He goes, it's not Sammy Hagar. I said, have you ever seen Sammy Hagar? He goes, no, I've never seen him. I go, well, and then Jim goes, well, look at his watch.
Wow.
He's got a Timex watch.
Now that's
a tell.
is amazing. I mean, it's a tell, but then just how tuned in wrestlers like that are, you know, to be able to pick up on. It's like a con man.
I was going to say, that's the carnival right there.
The carnival.
That's the whole thing. You
The
know,
mark.
you look for all the certain little details so you can fool them.
Right, exactly. So amazing.
Jim was funny about that kind of stuff, and he goes, Sammy Hagar wouldn't be wearing a Timex. He'd have a Rolex or something like that. He goes, it's not him. I'm going, Jim, it's him. He said it's Sammy Hagar.
Jim, it's him. Love that.
Anyway, the thing about it was that Adrian hands the dollar bill to Sammy Hagar. Sammy Hagar snorts this big line of cocaine in the dressing room, and there's people trying to get in the room. And
Okay.
Holy shit.
Amazing. So again, the reenactment of that the guy, I don't know it's a fake Sammy Hagar, just rips a big fat line.
That's right.
Right in front
This
of
is
him.
the 1986 after all.
Yeah, well, exactly. But it's also like, just as a side thing, for whatever reason, I don't know what it was, but Bret Hart woke up this day and decided to enter this interview and I'm going to bring my best cocaine stories for the boys today.
Wow.
Because this is like
It was-
one of 8.
He says, I read the whole transcript. He says several times, let's say it was snowing that day.
Yeah, right.
Quite a
Right.
bit.
It's I'm telling you, the amount of cocaine stories in this interview are amazing, and some of them are in the episode, the Adrian Adonis episode, but this is the best one.
we're like, go, go, go. And he's like, dude, snorting this big line of cocaine.
Jesus Christ.
And I remember as soon as he snorted it, he looked at me and Jim, and all of a sudden this little trickle of blood came down his nostril, like just. And I remember Jim looked at me and goes, it is Sammy Hagar. Like,
Oh my God.
Of course it is. He's a coke
Yeah,
fiend.
right.
Oh shit! I fucked it up. Sorry.
It's all right. It's a tough one to get.
Sorry,
These
sorry.
are the moments we live for, so you'll have to forgive us here.
Yeah.
As Brett
His
makes
face.
the face.
It is Sammy Hagar.
It is Sammy Hagar.
And it's,
I mean, that's incredible.
And then Neidhart.
yeah, right.
the Timex says he's fake. The
Right.
trickle of blood says he's real.
Right.
Yep,
That's
legit.
a real
And
celebrity.
it's like, again, this could be a scene out of Boogie Nights. It could be a scene out of
Absolutely.
anything. It's just incredible. It's just such a
And that
crime
Brett,
we didn't
and that
reenact
Brett
this.
is the one, the most like serious wrestler,
right.
about his craft and everything to bring this story out. It's also somewhat hilarious
Yeah.
in its own way.
Oh, it is. He came to set this day, and it was just this playful, funny side of Brett that I had never really seen
Right.
before. And so to me, it just endeared the hell out of me, and just these stories were killer. So,
That's
I mean,
wild.
Brett can be really funny, man, when he wants to be. It's amazing. Okay, here we go.
it is Sammy Hagar. Like he was convinced that it was Sammy Hagar as soon as he saw the blood coming down the nostril. He goes, that's what made him authentic, I guess. And then it's like, and Sammy Hagar, and they introduce him, and he's waving at the crowd, and he's giving the big, like he's a real rock star and all that.
Who is this legend?
This guy,
like-
wherever this guy is,
This guy needs to be
he
found.
rules.
Yeah.
And I think he knows he rules.
He does. He knows.
He's probably in the grave, honestly.
Yeah,
just,
I know. But
just the nerve.
And when you watch that clip, because it did air on television, and you look online, it's like, what is the story about this fake Sam? Because you can tell when he grabs the mic and says, "Hi, everybody," it's not him. It's not his voice.
That is
and the
right.
crowd starts shitting on him because they know
Right.
it's not him.
right.
But there's a dearth of detail as to how this guy ended up in there, and that's what we're bringing you on Unheard.
You're damn right.
Thanks to Bret Hart.
Yes.
Holy shit.
Dude, thank you, Brett. Okay,
Yeah,
here
right.
we go.
And it was a kind of a mixed reaction because they were ultimately, in the end, this guy was not Sammy Hagar. Anyway, so a few minutes later,
and you can hear the crew cutting up there because they don't know the punchline yet.
Yeah, they think
we spoiled it.
Yeah.
But they don't know, and they're like, "Oh my god!"
the whole time
Yeah.
it wasn't even him.
I mean, I got like 50 phone calls after this from everybody there.
55.
God.
Yeah. Get out of here. But it was literally like, "Oh my god, you better put this in the episode." This was always the first question from anyone who was there filming it that day,
Amazing.
because I wasn't there, sadly.
Yeah.
But was like, the Sammy Hagar story is in the episode, right? And I'm like, "Fuck!
You can't fit that in there.
How do you fit it in?"
I know,
It takes
right?
forever.
All right, sorry, Brett.
we're in the dressing room, and I remember talking to Sammy Hagar, and then we're all outside.
Or not Sammy Hagar.
Well, I always call him Sammy till I found out he wasn't.
Sammy.
I called him Sammy till
till he wasn't
Till
Sammy.
he wasn't Sammy. All right.
Anyway, we're talking away, and all of a sudden I remember the baseball player with the Yankees. He goes, I know Sammy Hagar. And he looks at me and goes, and you're not Sammy Hagar.
Oh, this is incredible.
Oh, my
Confrontation now. This is a whole scene. This could be a whole episode.
Yeah.
This is a
And
movie.
I remember he kind of just joking, like slapped him, like kidding, and then he walked right out. He walked right out into the crowd. And then I remember they were running all around in the building. I remember George Scott, who was like Vince's right-hand guy, the guy who handled the wrestlers, screaming, goes, "Who the hell said that guy was Sammy Hagar?" And I remember I was like thinking, like on the plane, I remember telling Adrian, "Yeah, it's Sammy Hagar." It's like, so that was me.
It was me.
It's like,
That was me.
I was the one that said he was Sammy
Oh
Hagar.
my God.
Amazing.
Look at his face.
Wait, yeah.
It's all right. It's still there. It's still there. Come on, Brett. Let's go.
Oh my God, he looks amazing.
and I remember like I didn't say anything. I said, I don't know. I said, all I know is he came with Adrian. And it was such a fallout over that in the next couple of days. Like whoever said that, it was just one of those things that got swept under the carpet. Like it was like clearly it didn't look good on WWF to have somebody introduced as Sammy Hagar when it wasn't.
Unbelievable.
Holy shit.
So thirsty to be worthy of Sammy Hagar coming to the show that they got worked into introducing him as such.
Oh my God.
I mean, it's such important wrestling history, to capture.
Yeah.
Because that, like you said, that's not
No
to
one
our
knows-
knowledge captured anywhere.
And until that clip resurfaced a few years ago on YouTube, unless you happen to be watching at the MSG network in New York, you wouldn't have seen this. It wasn't like a national broadcast.
Right. I mean, where did it come from? Did it come from one of the network shows or
uploaded
just
it.
someone?
Someone
Yeah.
from the MSG broadcast. They had it
Wow.
on tape.
That's
Yeah.
wild.
Ladies and gentlemen, Sammy Hagar.
I didn't even know. I got to find that clip.
That's
I gotta
amazing.
find that clip.
Yeah,
That's
That
spectacular.
is amazing. I'm
Highest
glad we
recommended.
led with that.
It found a home here in Unheard.
Yeah.
That's
Damn
the kind
right.
of thing we like to do. But for Brett, as we mentioned, kind of why it's against type is because this is a guy who's so deadly serious and artistic. We talked last time about McFoley and how he wrote a book and how he was so thoughtful and meditative on his wrestling experiences. Brett's like that as well. He wrote a book even longer than Mick's,
Right.
ultimately about every little experience he had on the road and cataloging kind of how he became who he became as a giant in the wrestling industry. And so in this clip, we get to talking to Brett a little bit. This is as part of your interview series with him for the Montreal Screwjob episode,
Right.
getting into his background and how he came into the business, and his father, Stu Hart, who was a wrestling promoter who later was bought out by Vince McMahon in 1984, leading to Brett coming into the WWF family along with his brother-in-law, British Bulldog Davey Boy Smith, and Dynamite Kid Tom Billington, who's also subject of a Dark Side episode, Dynamite Kid.
Yeah.
Here we're going to get a little bit of a flavor of what the conditions were like in Western Canada in the 50s in particular that led to Calgary becoming a bit of a stomping ground for famous American wrestlers. Superstar Billy Graham, who will be the subject of a Dark Side episode this season, did a lot of his early training there. Billy Jack Haynes, who's also been known for different reasons, as we'll get into.
Now
also, also the subject of an episode this season, trained there. Brian Pillman, who of course
That's right.
we have and we'll be talking about. So here he is, Bret Hart, describing the economic conditions as well as kind of the diversity of talent from different parts of the world that would find reason to come to his father's backyard when he was a young, impressionable, and precocious future young wrestling great.
All right, here we go.
Calgary was a very interesting territory, the Stampede Wrestling territory, that I know of. Had a rich history of all the biggest names from Antonio Rocca, Bruno, all the world NWA world champions every year, all worked for my father. Gorgeous George, all the most famous midgets, lady wrestlers, everybody.
Okay,
they all came
then.
through Calgary and worked for my father in Calgary. And it had a rich history. By the time I was born, in my years of sort of learning about the Calgary territory, it's eventually, because of the Canadian dollar, it started to drop. Back in the 50s, it was actually 10 cents, I think 10 cents more than the American dollar, which is good for Americans. That's why we had a rich...
So you make a dollar working for Stu, and it's you come home and it's worth so much more.
Right.
You can buy more in the United States with a Canadian dollar in the 50s. So that kind of explains why a lot of wrestlers saw it as a good deal to come out in the 50s to work for Stu. But as Brett says, that wouldn't last long.
Rich history where guys could actually make more money coming up to work for my dad than they could back home in the States. But that had reversed itself in the 60s, and you had a lot of trouble getting American wrestlers to come up and work for the lesser Canadian dollar back then. And so we had a lot of young wrestlers from all over, mostly from Canada and the United States. We had wrestlers from England, we had wrestlers from Puerto Rico, we had wrestlers from Australia, we had wrestlers from Mexico, we had French-Canadian wrestlers, and all these different regions all have different styles and different takes on wrestling.
So here's Brett growing up in a context of talent from all over the world, coming in to work for his father, surrounded by these wrestlers of all varying kinds of styles. And as we know, JP, Bret Hart's calling card in professional wrestling was his ability to get in that ring and weave together a match that made you think wrestling is an art. This is not something that you just scoff at.
Absolutely. I mean, that's you look at any of his matches, and you see somebody. I mean, as far back as we just did a tape from 1986, and even then, he's so crisp, he's so clean. But it's not clean in a way that isn't organic.
Right.
Like it just looks real. It looks tight. It looks snug. And he did that his entire career.
I know. And
it's just amazing. I know there was a clip that was that made the rounds from a '94 Raw where he faced 1-2-3 Kid, and they get this shot of him. Kid gives like an arm drag, and Brett sells it, and then he gives this little look like interesting.
Yeah, he was better than I expected in that moment.
That just sells the whole thing and makes Waltman look that much better.
Waltman being 1-2-3 Kid, yeah.
I mean, Brett is all about the craft, the full craft and the artistry behind wrestling, and how it's just obviously well far beyond just the performance and or choreography or anything. He brings all of this very organic craft, as you said, to it, and he's. He's one of the best that's ever done it, and
he doesn't have these moments in his matches where it's like, oh, that was a miss. That didn't look right.
Yeah.
That he wouldn't respond like that if he really got hit. You could watch him and be like, because wrestling moves are so hokey. Like, who's going to suplex somebody? Who's going to punch somebody like that? But when he did it, it was like, if wrestling moves worked in a real fight, this is probably what a wrestling match would look like.
And he brings all the nuances, as you said, to those moments in the ring where just those little gestures he gives, or just those little moments.
Yep.
Those are. Like, all those little details is what makes him one of the greats. It's all about the details, and he was always, fixated on perfecting those.
Yeah,
He's so good at it.
Cue up clip 2 to that effect. He's talking about being in this kind of melting pot of wrestling talent that come to work from his father from across the world. And he also grew up a wrestling fan. And I think he really brings home a point in this clip here as to the necessary conditions to become a great wrestler, he thinks, is you have to be a fan. You have to know what it is you can do in the ring that evokes reactions from the fans.
It's true. I mean, you look at any of them, the greats are always ones who were fans. Even you get big stars that weren't fans that become big stars, but they're not necessarily great in the ring.
They're not great at making you believe their match is real.
Yeah.
So here's Brett.
When I got into pro wrestling, I had a lot of big ideas about how wrestling could be more interesting. Because I think in order to be a really great wrestler, you have to have been a great wrestling fan first when you were a kid. Or at least when you start to understand wrestling is when you got to see it from a fan's point of view first. And I was always able to do that. I was like, if I was a wrestling fan and I was a fan of Bret Hart, this is what he should do when he walks out. And I could apply that kind of logic to everything I did in wrestling. And I think right from the very start, I had that ability to understand what wrestling was and how to tell that story in the ring and how to have a great match. It was all stuff that I think was instinctual.
Yeah, and I think what's amazing about Bret too is that he still, even though he was a fan and he grew up around it and he was obsessed with it and consumed by it, he also was original, because there's, nowadays you see when people grow up as fans, it's kind of the fanboy thing where you're, it's kind of like the layers of authenticity sometimes get lost. But with him, it's like he was able to be so inspired by, wrestling as a kid, but never lose sense of his own originality or his own sense of authenticity, because that's so important to him. And that's a good balance to have. Yeah. So not every person who grows up as a wrestling fan can be a great wrestler if you don't have that sense.
That calibration. What the great in-ring wrestlers do is they know what the audience expects to happen, and you can subvert those expectations subtly. And that's what makes your match stand out. Like, oh, wow, that was a twist I didn't expect from the hundreds of matches I've seen. Right. But the point is, unless you've seen hundreds of matches, you don't know how to throw that curveball to the wrestling fan. You don't know what's going to surprise.
I mean, it also doesn't hurt that he grew up in Hart House as well.
Yeah.
on the compound. Yeah. So this is all to say that this is this idealistic way Bret's growing up in the wrestling business. That if I mind my craft carefully, I can go on to great success. As we know, that kind of sort of strict adherence to doing things the right way crashes and burns with the Montreal Screwjob in 1997. It's hard to give a Cliff's Note to this thing, but basically Bret was about to leave the WWF because Vince couldn't afford to pay him anymore, and he was double-crossed in the middle of the ring on a live pay-per-view.
And it was legitimate. It wasn't part of the storyline. It was the most infamous off-script moment in wrestling history, well-documented.
Yep. Bret went into the ring thinking he was going to keep the belt via disqualification, but what they did is have Shawn Michaels put a sharpshooter submission hold on him and have the referee ring the bell as if Bret had submitted, which he hadn't. Yeah. Shawn takes the belt, disappears into the night, and Bret is now left no longer the champion and just totally jilted. So sort of like left at the altar on his way out.
It's Shakespearean in many ways. It really is.
It really is.
After so many years of proud service, and exemplary professionalism in WWF as far as we can tell.
It goes with exactly what we were talking about last week's Unheard with Mick Foley, that concept of, they can make you, they can break you. You are under their thumb.
And you will never serve them faithfully enough that you're not the next potential victim.
Expendable person.
Of this
Always expendable.
Yeah.
Always expendable.
Yeah.
And so who's the architect of all this? If we can get clip 6 ready here.
Sure.
It's Vince McMahon, the WWF impresario, the guy who, remade the world in his image and sits rent-free in the mind of anyone who ever worked for him until they're in the grave.
That's the way I like it.
And that's correct. And
I've never seen that in person.
And here's trust me, you don't want to.
Okay.
Not now.
I just want to go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say Bret here is going to talk about just describe Vince McMahon, and just the word that comes out of his mouth it says it all.
Yes, and I just wanted to say too, sorry, I put my phone away.
It's all
sorry. I just wanted to say, this always provokes an interesting response. This question,
sure,
who is Vince McMahon? How would you describe Vince McMahon? Or sometimes, for someone who doesn't know Vince, how do you describe him? And it's always like it's the weight of that question is very large.
I believe that I'm an entertainment entrepreneur.
But I mean, most wrestlers who've worked for him would have a different answer based on their current standing with the company.
Exactly.
So you ask them that question in 2004 after they got released, you get a much different answer than when they're back in the good graces for $10,000 a year on a Legends contract in 2014.
Right. Exactly. Okay.
So what do you say, Bret? You know Vince well.
Well, how does one describe Vince McMahon? It's kind of funny to say, but he's probably like closest thing I can think of is he's like God.
Whoa.
He's he can do anything he wants with your life. Mm-hmm. When you see him and you shake his hand, you know that this guy can make or break your life in 1 second. Like with just.
Why did we not use that line? If anyone's listening who worked on this, why didn't we use that line?
I hate that Unheard's going to become like a scolding exercise.
I know,
right? Worked on season 1.
Finger pointing.
There's going to be desks I'm going to be standing on and pointing
to Fred. Here it is.
Okay, here it is.
Calling you into his office, like just to ask you something. You don't know when you sit down, you go, maybe this is where he's going to tell me that I'm done, you know. And so you never, I was always quite, especially when I first met Vince, I was very intimidated by him and very, almost didn't want to be, see, here comes Vince down the hall. I just duck into another room. I didn't want to be somebody that crossed his mind where it's like, what's he still doing here? Maybe we should get rid of that guy, you know. So Vince was always somebody that you revered. You had had a lot of power, and you knew he had a lot of power, and he had a lot of brains. And for guys like me that were already sort of, I was on the ground floor of all that. I was working for him. I had a deal with him. My dad did. I got on side, like, I'm gonna be with this guy. I'm gonna work my hardest for him. I'm gonna give him everything I got. He's
And that's a thing too, just real quick, about Vince that a lot of the guys talk about is this. He does then become this pseudo father figure to them.
Oh, yes.
And that's when things really start to get,
Yes.
I don't know, they get unhealthy.
Yeah,
you
well,
know?
that's when
Absolutely.
the leverage gets so outweighed in his favor.
Right.
It's
And
like,
then it's almost like when he does then, you know, he creates that environment for you where you kind of look up to him in that way.
Yeah.
But then the business, the harsh, like, ones and zeros comes down. And that's why people feel so emotionally burned and manipulated and exploited, is I think because he plays both of those roles, you know, for them.
he's very good at making you think that you're like the most important person to him.
Well, it's like it's an incredible form of manipulation.
That's what I mean.
In that, you know, he is going to be both your boss and your father.
Right.
And it's like, so you now have a financial, I don't know what you call it, but like, you know, you're financially important to him, and you're like also have this emotional
connection
with him. And it's like
mentorship.
Right. But it's like, you know, that's very,
it's a recipe for disaster.
Oh yeah.
Potentially.
Oh yeah. But for you, not for him.
No, not for him.
Never for
Only
him.
Never for him.
Only for
you know,
you.
because that's just it. Because he is always pulling the strings.
Yeah. Right.
hopefully going to see something in me and give me a chance to show him and everyone else that I'm really good.
And that's the other thing. It creates this sort of environment where, you know, you want to, you know, please him and do good for him and be, you know, so that's probably a necessary quality to some extent of a promoter. Yeah. You know, you want to instill
or any boss, but at the same,
any boss, yeah.
But it's unique in that, you know, his obligation to you is so easily severed. It's so easily severed. It's not like these guys don't have health insurance. These guys don't have pension. These guys don't have benefits. They're really just fly-by-night contractors.
Right.
And you tell yourself you're more than that when you reach the level Brett did. And he found out he's not.
Right.
You know?
You're not untouchable.
And Vince's story is so remarkable because for people that he sort of put in this position, he ends up coming out in the money every time. He ends up coming out. He's been indicted. He walks. This happens. WWF takes off to make more money than they ever made after they do this to Brett. He turns that, as you guys well documented in the Montreal Screwjob episode, into his own heel character. So now the evil Vince McMahon is the ultimate enemy of Stone Cold Steve Austin. To the bank they go.
Yeah,
every
the
time.
Layers of meta in terms of how wrestling works, of folding in reality into the fantasy world. To, you know, it's a constant cycle, and it's very easy for someone to get lost in that, like who's even a part of it. You know, and that is kind of, I think, the story of the Montreal Screwjob. You know, it's multi-layered in that, in kind of the people who participated in it getting lost in the sauce of you know, this weird meta gray area of the wrestling business, you know.
And so there you see a Brett who's eager to please and wanting to earn the trust, respect, and loyalty of Vince McMahon. And we know it plays out. He becomes WWF champion. Mm-hmm. He becomes one of the absolute icons of the industry and of the company. Yeah. But in 1996, he signs a 20-year contract with Vince, which was an unheard of level of commitment from Vince McMahon at the time, in a time when WCW was recruiting a lot of ex-WWF stars to the NWO and other big-time angles that put WCW in pole position in the U.S. wrestling market, in the global wrestling market, and put Vince on his heels. I mean, the WWF was struggling. Yeah. And so eventually Vince comes to Brett and says, you know, pal, I can't pay you on the contract like I expected to when I went above and beyond to keep you from going to WCW. And while the narrative is that, you know, it went right to Vince, let me help you get into WCW, Brett, because we're such close friends. In reality, as this clip from one of your interviews with Brett indicates, there was kind of a half step before that. Yep. Where the WWF, according to Bret at least, was actually willing to restructure how they did business and its geographic footprint significantly so that they could reduce costs and be able to afford Bret Hart. It wasn't like the first thing Vince ever did was come to Bret and say, we can't pay you. There was actually a talk like, let's talk about how we might change the organization so we can afford you.
Yeah, we'll talk after, but we watch this. But to me, and just listening to it, it just does sound like such a pitch.
Yeah.
Such a sales pitch to, it's not you, it's me kind of thing.
Bingo.
Where it's like you are slow dancing. You know how this is going to upset Bret. Doing all this, but it's a slow manipulation to getting him out of the company.
Because as Bret said, the second he got that kind of a commitment out of Vince to stay, there was a chip on Vince's shoulder about having been put in a position that he had to agree to such rich terms. And Bret comes back in the 96 Survivor Series, and Bret complains to this day in his book about how they seem to be denigrating him on commentary in subtle ways.
Yep.
Like, he doesn't quite look the same, but a rust there.
Right.
Yeah, and those are all the tricks, that they slowly, and it's so freaky and Truman Show-esque, where it's just like all these elements in your surrounding environment. No wonder wrestlers at times can be extremely paranoid.
Well, I mean, you think about it. I mean, I think that that wrestling fans, I mean, especially when you're younger, you take for granted how important the commentary aspect of a match is.
They frame everything.
Some of the greatest matches of all time might not be as great if the commentary isn't there to support the match.
Yeah.
And so, like as a wrestler, you're in the ring, you don't know what they're saying about you.
Right.
You have no idea what they're doing. They're talking
unless
about,
you watch it back.
Unless you watch
somehow.
it back, but even then, but in the midst of it, you don't know, and that, and then if you do watch a match and they are talking crap about you behind your back, like during the actual match, the next match, now you're even more paranoid.
Right.
Yep. And it goes from there. So here's Bret in clip 7.
Clip 7.
Talking about, as you put it, Evan, I think rather well, the promise that's sort of made about, it's not you, it's me, and what we're willing to do to keep you.
Yeah.
So he goes, I'm not sure, maybe we can somehow work it out that because I'm trying to sell some property and different things right now to get some more assets for the company. And he goes,
talking about Vince doing this.
Vince,
yes.
Maybe we can dodge a bullet here and get things right. As it stands right now, I don't think I can pay you anymore.
Yeah, and see, that's kind of a subtle way to say, I might have to sell property.
You really want to do this to me?
So you want to do this to me? It might be much easier if you just like go away and I don't have to sell this property anymore,
What I've been paying you. So any day now you're going to get a check and it's not going to be what you're supposed to get. And that's where we're going to have to figure out what we're going to do from there. And so he was prolonging it in the sense that he was putting it off for a little longer, but eventually there's this problem with the company. He told me WWF was going bankrupt. They're actually losing so much money now that they're going to have to downsize, and they're going to become a Northeast wrestling promotion. And he's going to wrestle in, they're going to run all their big cities on the East Coast, like New York and Philadelphia and Baltimore and Boston. And they won't need to go to, Madison, Wisconsin and La Crosse or different places scattered all over. So anyway, that was kind of what he basically was like, he goes, I don't want to, you've been with this company the longest.
Well, can you imagine, JP, if through some form of, financial engineering, they kept him and Bret Hart was around for the Attitude Era?
Oh my God.
Listen, my dream was always, because as a diehard Steve Austin fan from even WCW, during his rise in 97, to me, the dream was, because he never got that clean victory over Bret, that was WrestleMania 14 in my mind.
Oh, my God.
All through 97, I'm like, okay, this is what's going to happen. In 98, he's going to win the Rumble, and it's going to be Bret. Bret, he's going to beat Bret, and that's going to be finally the changing of the guard. And
not to mention, not just the Attitude Era, too, but also thinking, like, had Bret not been injured, and infamously the Bill Goldberg situation at WCW, what he would have done with the talent that was coming in from WCW in the early 2000s.
Absolutely.
The Benoits, the Angles, the Mysterios, whatever. It would have been, oh my God, it would have been incredible. So,
and he wouldn't have perhaps not suffered the career-ending injury he did.
In 20 years, he would have just retired about 7 years ago.
I know.
It would have been amazing.
Yeah.
It does that that clip there does touch off a bunch of what ifs in your head. You know,
It does.
Austin versus Brett at WrestleMania 14, like you said.
Yeah.
But we know that didn't happen.
No.
The screw job took place. And Evan, I want to pause on this and talk to you about this because I know from talking to you over the years that, you know, you got Brett's trust to sit for the Montreal Screwjob, which is a touchy subject. He's been asked about a million times. We asked him about it one time. He was like, really? But he did it. He was nice enough to talk quickly about it.
Oh, that's good.
But you ended
after
up.
he got paid.
Well, yeah, of course. That's a pro wrestling thing.
Yeah, there you go.
Nothing wrong with that.
No.
No, nothing wrong with that.
And so you ended up circling back with him on the Screwjob episode that this interview was from, and he wasn't too happy.
Yeah, I mean, man, hindsight 2020 and things you would do differently now than you did then there's so many things I would probably do differently now. I mean, back when we were putting together the first season, you know, I mean, look, every wrestling fan has Montreal Screwjob fatigue, you know, because we've heard about it for so long. But at the time, we really, you know, the show wasn't called Dark Side of the Ring when we were producing the first season. We didn't know what the show was going to be called. But the idea surrounding it was we wanted to try and take the most seminal stories from wrestling that could potentially interest non-fans.
Right.
You know, that anybody would be riveted by, just great stories, human stories. And this is one of those. And we wanted to have all of those as being part of this show. So we went into it, making it, and there's a lot of things I would do just now after doing 6 seasons of the show. There's a lot of different ways I probably would have told that story. But I think, you know, Brett, and rightfully so, I think his biggest criticism of the episode was the cast of interview subjects that were alongside him. He wasn't too fond of, you know, Bruce Pritchard's point of view. He wasn't fond of Eric Bischoff's point of view. Certainly, famously, those two don't see eye to eye. And Scott Hall, who in the episode shared his conspiracy theory that it's all a work, which, look, to every wrestling fan, that's the most preposterous thing in the world. Yep. But again, taking, you know, 10 steps back, like for someone who doesn't know anything about this story, the thought that, you know, I mean, wrestling in and of itself is, you know, what is real and what's fake. The lines are blurred constantly. And so
if you told someone in the general public, like what happened in the Montreal Screwjob,
they may
like, that's all just as much BS as everything else that happens in wrestling. They don't believe it's real.
Yeah, so they wanted to have some representation of that concept in the episode. But of course, you know, Brett, knowing where he's coming from, it's the most real thing in the world to him. He's, you know, obviously very triggered by that, I'm sure. So, but I think there was probably a more nuanced way we could have, you know, put all that together. And I do think that there's just the 44-minute sort of format of the show doesn't allow sometimes for, which is a very nuanced story that has a lot of complexity in terms of deals and timing and these little things about, you know, how all these different factors had to line up just right for this one thing to happen. And it's hard to get that across in such a short amount of time. So, but I mean, that's the challenge for every episode. And I think we probably could have crafted that in a way that, I mean, I'm still proud of the episode, you know, for sure. And, you know, and it goes into, you know, other great areas of the story and aspects of the story I'm very proud of. But I think there was a way probably where, you know, we could have crafted it in a way that, and I think choosing different interview subjects here, he would have been more happy with it. But again, the biggest lesson I learned in doing this show now for 6 seasons is there is no way to make everyone happy. And that was a hard lesson for me to learn because I want everybody to be happy, but you can't.
But I mean, you know, what I think in defense of you and your decisions, honestly, it's like, what do you know, you need to have differing perspectives, like especially for people who aren't familiar with it, who don't know about the screw job as much. Like, you want to give them as much information as possible from all these different areas, and then like and then the people, the audience decides. And like, Brett, you've got, listen, I get it. He's the victim in the whole thing. Yeah. But you know, there are other points of view. You have a very, very skewed point of view because of the way you suffered from it. But then there are other people from other parts of it who were involved, who were there. Yeah. It's like, it's hard. Like, you kind of need all the perspectives in order for us as an audience member to say, oh, okay, this is what I actually believe.
Well, and that's always been.
And I believe with Scott Hall. That's it.
And I'm with Scott. But it you know, for us, it was like our MO with all these shows was always to present the information from as many different points of view as you can, as we can, and then you walk away with your own determination of what you think went down. But I think of course we made a lot of the episode about Cornette and Russo, and maybe we could have scaled back on that and to add more time. I get that. We
talked about that last season.
We did. So there's critiques I have looking back at it now, but I think that for Brett, he was very vocal to me about his reaction to the episode. Someday maybe those text messages will come to light. No.
Those remain unread.
No, they're unread.
That's a book.
Yeah,
that's a book. Dark Side of the Ring, unread.
Unread. I left him on unread. No.
Yeah.
No, and I think he's warranted in all his reaction was. But it said to me more so than just like taking it personally or anything, because I didn't. But a lot of it just shows how real this whole thing was to him.
Sure.
And how upsetting and traumatic. Mm-hmm. I remember when we interviewed his ex-wife later down for Dynamite Kid, and she would tell us just how like this affected their marriage. Yeah. It affected their lives. This is not just some, wrestling angle, and where some in the business who were on the other side of the story would feel like, what's the big deal?
Right.
Just wrestling, just business.
Yeah, well.
No, it's more than that.
Well, if you're as good at it as Brett was.
Yeah.
Right. And there are people who are gotten to by the fact that Brett was that good. They can't stand it. And and so they point out other parts of his personality as sort of like, how he has like the shrine to himself at his house and things. It's like
he deserves it.
It's like I think as a wrestling fan, we want a wrestler who takes it more seriously than we do.
100%.
We don't have any use for a wrestler who takes it less seriously than we do as fans. Why would we watch otherwise? Right. But you pointed out, the comment from Scott Hall in the episode about how Montreal appears to be a work to him. And a big part of the reason people say that is because a documentary crew was following Bret Hart for a Canadian documentary called Wrestling with Shadows. Mm-hmm. It was put together by a Canadian director by the name of Paul J.
Shout out, also awesome doc, by the way.
Yes, groundbreaking for its time. They happened to be following Bret Hart at the time this all went down because they were going to do a documentary about him. And then in the middle of doing this documentary, the screw job happens. Yeah. And everyone's always said, if this wasn't a work, how come all of this stuff was on camera? Why were cameras allowed backstage? Very rare at WWE. Documentarians allowed backstage. And what I love about this next clip we're going to play, which is clip 8, it's Brett talking about why the cameras were there. Ooh. It makes a ton of sense when he lays it out, to my way of thinking.
Okay, and again, this is traumatic for me, too. Because this should have been in the goddamn episode.
Once again, why Unheard exists.
Pointing the finger.
I think they call it proof of concept.
There it is, yes.
They should do a show like this with other filmmakers and put them on trial of why did you do X, Y, Z.
I love how he thinks it's on trial.
Yeah, no, he's on trial.
No,
we're judging him.
It's not. You can judge me. It's fine. Judge. No, but seriously, this is an amazing detail that, again, if I could go back in time, maybe we had 2 hours for this one. Who knows? We could have just built out, because the whole Montreal Screwjob is and everything that went into it. It's like, from a narrative point of view, it's almost like the inner workings of a bank heist. Mm-hmm. It's all these elements coming together, all the tension of these different people planning their own agendas, and how it's all going to play out in this very organic, real sense in the middle of a fabricated world like wrestling, right?
Yes.
So anyway, I digress, but this is a great detail that I wish we would have fit in. God damn it! What is it?
Why we're looking here at a clip 8.
Clip 8,
and this is sort of the answer to why if it wasn't fake, why was everything being filmed backstage? Yeah. Why wasn't WWF expelling the documentary crew backstage, knowing what they were about to do to Bret Hart? And here's his answer.
And I remember WWF had to just about just cringe when they saw them. The whole camera crew come in like, oh, we didn't think about them. We forgot all about those guys.
And I love that. Just the idea. But just that, like, they're trying to plan to screw this guy.
All these machinations.
Everything they've thought of, every angle possible. They're actually going to do it.
Yep.
They're going to screw him on live TV, but the camera crew that's going to capture it all.
Listen, I can totally see how that would be, because it's not an everyday thing. I mean, it's been normal-ish now because he's been having the crew around for whatever.
If I remember
6
correctly,
months.
They had stopped following him for several weeks before this, so it kind of lapsed in their memory that they could show up anytime they wanted.
Right, exactly. They were allowed to.
They had credentials to get into the building for the rest of what he's about to say.
All right. Sorry, Brett.
Done. But their passes were good till the end of the year. So they had all the certificates and the badges and stuff to get in, and they're filming.
And they couldn't really say anything. They couldn't tip their hand like, hey, we want you guys to go because we got a big screw job. We're going to cheat this guy. You know, they couldn't tip their hand. And they filmed everything. Like they were just like normal, back filming this show. I think Paul J, he's always told me, he goes, I had a really strong hunch that something was going to happen because you're telling me all the stuff that's going on. I'm going, something's going to happen. And but he goes, I didn't let that on to you. He would surmise and go, do you wonder if they would try to, you know, and I go, well, they might try to screw me, but you know, like we rationalized about it. But I get offended when people say, you know, why didn't you see it coming? It's like, I did see it coming. You know, even if you see something coming, doesn't mean you can stop it from happening. You know, when I remember Vader said to me just before I walked out to the ring, watch out, they're going to try to screw you. And I was like, I know they are, but they're not going to do it.
Wow.
There you have it,
wow.
right? Because you can't kick the film crew out. That would tell Brett they're really going to do something to me.
Right. I mean, if you gave them the passes and stuff, and they had these passes for a full year, yeah, like that definitely is a telltale sign right there. Like something's going to happen if they kick out.
Yeah, because the way he describes it, they get in without having to check in with WWE personnel necessarily.
Right.
They get in because they have clips. You know, they probably just some schmuck at the arena. It's like, all right, go through. You get the badge, and then they're there, and now you're screwed because, pardon the pun, because you can't kick them out because that would tip off to Brett. You're about to do something.
So devastating. That's not in the episode. Very hard to watch for me. But I you know, it is something that I want to say too. It's like, as fatigued as all the hardcore wrestling fans are over this story.
Yes.
It is the gift that keeps on giving.
It
Of course.
It keeps, there's always another detail that
Yes.
some, you know,
Yes.
schmuck filmmaker like me leaves on the cutting room floor that then will come out at some point.
Well, the thing is, Brett has such an exacting memory of this, and it's all in his book to some degree, but he's got documentation and things, and a lot of the things people say in trying to defend the WWF's actions here, things they assume were true about Brett's contractual status or the fact that he was willing to lose the championship, just not on this night. And then you make it seem like he was never willing to lose the championship. You don't believe him when he says that.
Right.
And it's like, well, that's the trust he had worked 20 plus years to try to build up.
And that also is, I think, a nuance that could have been better articulated in our episode, because I do think that's also probably something that when you talk to a Bruce Pritchard who's in the episode, or you talk to anybody else who's on the other side of the story, I think their perspective is that they're playing that aspect up, that he wasn't willing to.
Yeah.
And there was no...
We couldn't trust that he wouldn't show up with the WWF title as the WWF champion on WCW television.
Right.
Come
And
on.
so...
I mean, Alundra Blaze did it, so obviously...
They had reason to believe that it would...
Right. Come on.
People could be talked into doing it.
Right.
And so the point is...
And so what if they did? Sorry.
Totally. And the point is,
it's
Brett,
wrestling.
We don't care. This goes back to the beginning of this episode. We don't care how loyally you've served us.
Yes.
We are not going to believe you when you tell us you're not going to show up on Nitro with a belt. We're not going to believe you. We have to do this to you because we live in a world where you just cannot trust somebody like that.
Yep.
And that's wrestling.
But do you guys think, just as fans, like, let's say that happened. Let's just say that happened. Like, is that really that damaging for them?
I think it makes people want to watch Raw even more.
I agree.
I mean,
to see what they do in response.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a lot of the times I've always noticed that wrestling organizations are so afraid of these. I mean, we talked about it with DX going down to that arena, you know, back in '98, and it's like, actually, if you let them in, then everyone would watch your show.
Everybody. Yeah, and but like there is sort of, I think, an old tradition in wrestling where at least from McMahon's point of view, is you don't acknowledge the competition.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's giving them a plug or whatever the rationale is. But to embrace this, because it does go with the sort of thought of more believability. It does it does break that fourth wall in a way that I think both companies still wouldn't expose the business because they know it's for the greater good.
Yeah.
And I think there was a way to bring it up to that point. Maybe that was too far ahead of its time to think about it in that way. Because what you don't want is when one promotion mentions another and it seems like, you know,
they're in cahoots.
They're well, not, or they're like groveling, or it's coming from a point of like they're just trying to get the rub or the attention. You can do it in a way, I feel like, that is still...
Well, Vince had told himself by that point
Yeah.
that he was in a totally different business than WCW.
Yeah, right.
You know, we're like Disney, we're an entertainment conglomerate.
Yeah.
And so
we're in the entertainment business.
Oh, yeah, right.
so to lose these people, you
I
have
don't know
to
about this wrestling shit.
Yeah.
I've never heard of that before.
Yeah.
So for him to acknowledge that he cares about what WCW is doing.
Yeah.
You can't have that because that betrays his mentality of we're not even in the same business. That's how much better we are at this.
Yeah.
And that has a lot to do with the
Never
two.
was going to happen, I guess.
Well, it comes down to the moment, as we know. It comes down to the moment where Bret confronts Vince McMahon backstage after the aforementioned screw job and punches him in the face, punches him in the jaw. And cameras weren't in the room for that, but they were in the hallway.
Yep.
As Vince stumbles out in a concussive state, as Bret takes out his frustrations on his way out the door in WWF, because he decided to go with the uppercut. This is an insight that's
I love it.
in the interview. This
I
is
also love when he in Wrestling with Shadows, he says he drilled him.
He drilled
I love that. Drilled him.
Well, this is a drill.
Yeah, right. It's like you can drill from up.
Yeah,
You
you
can
can
drill
with
up.
a drill, absolutely.
The drill.
But, we started this episode talking about how Bret appreciated the finer points of the craft by all these diverse wrestlers coming through his dad's territory and being a fan as a kid and being able to appreciate the nuances of the physicality of being a good wrestler. And that comes into play here when he, let's say, goes through an exercise in shot selection. Because the way he thinks about it, and this clip is great in bringing that out, Vince, to his way of thinking, Bret's way of thinking, wanted to come in the locker room and confront him in a way that he could save face. He could say, I confronted Bret over my decision. I felt so good about it.
Right.
And I emerged from that
He's
discussion.
not going to run away from it. Yeah.
Right.
And I emerged from that confrontation still with my head held high.
Right.
I wasn't humiliated and knocked out. And if, as Bret tells it here, if he came overhand with the right,
Yep.
with a million people trying to break them up, that punch would have been deflected, blocked, and it wouldn't have landed with the impact it did. And because he went with the uppercut, here we are.
And I just want to say, for anyone who's not as familiar with this story, this is a big part of the, I don't want to say lore because it really happened, but this is a big part of the story is, behind closed doors, right after, Vince and the company screwed Bret in the ring on live pay-per-view, there was to be, Bret and Vince interacting after this, and Bret laid him out, for real. And then, of course, that then organically became part of the storyline when Vince, after Bret left the company, started to weave that into the storyline that really happened.
He goes on TV with his black eye.
He goes on TV with the black eye and talks about this thing happening, which is further blurring the lines, further leading to speculation at the time of, was this real, is this not?
Yeah.
So anyway.
So here's the punch that Bret can go to his grave relishing.
It's amazing.
Wrestlers had left before this happened, too. This was the last match of the night. A lot of wrestlers had gone to their hotels and didn't know anything about it. But I will say this much, is that he wanted to get into a pull apart, and he had all those guys there to do that. It was just going to be a little scuffle, but in a scuffle with a pull apart, everybody looks okay, and it's a nice, that's the ending that Vince would have been happy with. But he just didn't take into account that, and trust me, if I had gone with an over right punch, like throwing a baseball punch with Vince, which is how most people throw their first punch, as an overhand right if you're gonna fight somebody. It was coming, but it changed to an uppercut. And Vince, if it had been an overhand punch, all those guys would have grabbed my arm. It would have been a pull apart. Nothing would have happened. Vince would have saved face, and he would have said the next day that I faced him in the dressing room and I told him that he was wrong, and he would have had his argument about what happened. And
so we had to punch him.
Yep.
Yeah, you obviously invited it.
Yeah.
Right.
It's just wild. It's amazing. All right, sorry.
And it's like, that's what it came down to. And it was just it was a lucky decision on my part that I didn't try to throw a punch, and that I came underneath where nobody could grab my arms and delivered the knockout punch that Vince was sure that was never going to happen, just like I was sure I wasn't going to get screwed over.
Oh,
Excellently executed, as you might say,
damn right.
by
You're
Bret
damn
Hart.
right.
Yeah.
And that will do it for our treatment this week on Dark Side of the Ring Unheard, taking a look at what the archives contain about the great Bret the Hitman Hart. Don't forget to tune in on Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time on Vice TV as Season 6 of Dark Side of the Ring commences. Look at whatever came of Tony Halma, a.k.a. Ludwig Borga, after a fleeting yet somewhat memorable run in the WWF. And, of course, do join us next time on Dark Side of the Ring Unheard, where we dig into the archives to get you acquainted with a character that just has a one-of-a-kind perspective on this business. You've probably never heard of him. His name is Kim Wood, and he was an advisor and consigliere to Brian Pillman, who was well-documented in the past seasons of Dark Side of the Ring. We're going to get to know Kim Wood, and we're going to get to know the wrestling business from a different perspective than perhaps you've ever heard. That's next time, Dark Side of the Ring Unheard.